We want to make a blanket on this loom that's too narrow to make a blanket on. And so here we've already pre-slayed 1/2 of the warp. See this blue stripe? That's half of my blue stripe. We're going to pre-slay another warp that's the same identical warp on top of the first one. If it were on a big loom, this would be flipped over and it would just keep going. But we're going to do a double weave with a fold on one side. And so we'll show you a nice way to get ready for beaming. I'm going to put this reed stand here and put those lee sticks on it. And so here's the other side, nice reed stand, and there's a place here for the lee sticks to sit nicely. Here's a first little chunk. And now that my reed is standing up, I can go ahead and start to pre-slay this second warp. This warp is identical to the first warp. And originally, in the first pre-slay, I used every other dent in a coarse reed. And so these other loops are coming through the empty dents. You wouldn't have to do it that way. If you pre-slayed using every dent in a reed, you could still use those dents for your second warp. And so this goes along very nicely. I'm putting the loop through, and then I'm just collecting these loops on my wrist. This is the same way that I demonstrate pre-slaying at the table in my first video that I made nearly 30 years ago now. And it's still a good method for pre-slaying when you need it. So that first warp below, I pre-slayed it right at the loom, the way I show in my flippy book, in case you have that or want it. And then this is a way to pre-slay that I show in my video from a long time ago. And so here is one section, just about done. Vävstuga reed hook there. And I'm going to check to make sure this opening is the same as the opening back here on the lee sticks. It looks good. I'm going to slip this warp stick in and just let it sit right there. And now Eva is going to come and join me. We're going to keep pre-slaying. So this is a bonus. I get to show you how to do this with two people. You saw how to do it with one. And so if you were to purchase one of our blankets that's in our warps to go section of our store, and you have just a little loom, but you want to make a wide blanket, this would be a great way to do that. You can see how I'm handing Eva loops, and then she's collecting them on her wrist. There are other reasons that you might want to have two different warps layered on top of each other for beaming. Think about doing a rep weave. If you have two blocks of a rep weave and both of them are complicated colorways and they're really easier to wind the warp as two separate warps and then pile them on top of each other in layers, that would be another reason to use this technique. And if you have different materials, I'm thinking of a warp that, the most tedious warp that I ever wound. It was partially 16-1 linen and it was partially 16-2 cotton. I wound it 2 times in my life. The first time I had to tie little knots after every 2 passes or so, and it took a long time. It was extremely tedious. But when I did it the second time, I thought, you know, I'm going to do the cotton warp as a separate warp, and I'm going to do the linen warp as a separate warp. And I piled them on top of each other, and it was so much easier. So here we are, chugging along, trying not to bore you too much. This is nice to do with two people, even at the table. With a regular warp, you can pre-sley this way, setting these stands up at a table. And these are our Vävstuga reed stands made in our own workshop here. These. And here we are nearing the end of this group. You can see how in this case these two warps are identical. And we're just adding the second layer right on top. And so if you purchase a blanket warp from us, it comes in two chains like this, and so you would just easily be able to do this. And there's our last loop. Now I'm going to come around and I'll show you how you put those loops onto. Actually, we're going to use a new tie bar and the same cord loops. So we will do that next. Thank you, Eva, for your help with pre-slaying. Here is a second tie bar. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take out the reed stand. And I have these new loops, these warp loops. I'm going to divide them in the same place my first ones are divided. See, I've got 4 yellow ones over there, so we'll have 4 yellow ones over there. And I'm simply going to take my tie bar and put it through the original cord loop, and then put it through my warp loops. And where's my second division? I'm going to look here. It comes just to the end of the red ones. So we're going to use that. And the stick that's put in here shows us where our loops are. And so I'm going to go through a cord loop, this one on the loom, and then I go through the warp loops. I go through the cord on the loom, and look for my next division. Over here it looks like I've got 2 of the red ones, so we'll do that. So warp loops, cord loop, last warp loops, cord loop. And then you're ready to continue your regular warping process. Put some tension on the threads and switch the lee sticks. But what we have are 2 tie bars, one for each warp.